Guilhaume, cinematographer for Emilia Pérez. I know the initial script you got was completely different from the final product we got. It wasn't a musical yet. So how did that evolve into what we got this year?
Oh, no, the first script I received was it was more two ideas. It was one, so one was not a musical, was one the story of Emilia Perez, but Jacques was talking about a handheld film, maybe a more Asperos vibe, very gritty and realistic. And another project was how he actually wrote the story. He wrote it like an opera, thinking of a stage and with singers and five acts, like in a classic opera piece. So those two projects were evolving together, but in two parallel dimensions. And one day just received a call announcing that it would be only one film. It would be a musical, and yes, yeah, a lot of things were yet to be discovered at this time.
So what was your reaction when he told you that?
Mm, I don't remember my reaction. It was solving a lot of questions of how those two projects were coexisting and what project would be what. Then it was suddenly making sense. I think it was just what he wanted to do from the beginning. And the at this time we thought that we would shoot in Mexico, so we already had been uh, there for location scouting 1 year ago, and we went there for one more year, prepping this new idea of a musical, and then uh, another message arrived after the summer, and the last location scouting was that okay, we are getting it wrong. It shouldn't be a realistic musical. It should be kind of off the ground, not too realistic. It should be shot in a studio in some stage, and there will be tons of blue screens, and the film is going to be this piece that just takes also from the opera in its form, and the use of black background sometime, or of less realistic sets,
Hmm. Yeah,
lighting.
because you guys are really balancing real two distinct looks here, and it on one hand it feels really gritty, and parts of it feels really like dreamlike. It's like fantasy versus reality. What were the challenges of balancing those two looks like that, like, and one like on the ground in Mexico, and then like the other in the studio with blue screen and green screen, which I feel like maybe people don't know you guys did that, use blue screen.
Yeah, the question was how to make only one piece,
Yeah.
and the art direction had to be consistent, of course, and technically the way we shot sequences had to be driven more by the emotion of the sequence more than the technique we used to capture the scene. And we were always focusing, try to forget all of the mess, the technicality around each sequence, and just focus on what we really wanted to tell into each sequence. And so we also shot uh, some pieces in Mexico in almost documentary style. I've been shooting some interior sequences alone with the camera, even doing the focus, myself. So the goal was just to have only one grammar throughout all of these sequences. Although we also had this kind of maybe two types of musical sequences in the film. Some were really filmed like the story itself, almost like a dialogue, and the song Papa, for example, or a very powerful song where Carla sings why she wants to do this transition, and these and those sequences were shot almost like the rest of the film, and some other sequences from musical sequences would just call for something really different, because you just leave reality for a while and then you would just go back
Yeah,
inside.
like a lot of Zoe's sequences.
Two of the majors, Zoe singing and dancing sequences. The sequence that's called El Allegato, where she writes the plea that she will just actually give to her boss in the beginning of the film in a market that's building itself around her. And another big sequence with Zoe, which is called El Mal. She's in the fundraisers gala, and suddenly she expresses what she feels, but you're more like in her head. But she, in this moment, takes control of everything in the film. She takes control of the camera movement. She takes control of the lights, and she's pointing to the people where the lights should just go and reveal in the image.
I do love the way you play with light, because some of the sequences, the light changes, like the London dinner scene when the revelation happens between Carla and Zoe. It's like everything stops and then the spotlight's on
Mhm.
them, and then there's some sequences where it's just a black background, the spotlight's on the main characters. What was it like developing those shots?
So there's something with Jacques. It's almost like he's one of those directors who has a signature shot, and Jacques, it's a black glove shot where the operator puts a black glove around the lens and just you do almost like an iris, but a vibrating iris around a face or something like this. It's something he's done throughout all of his films, and we still did that on that film. But on that film, we also explored kind of the same idea of isolating a character and just a face in the image, but we did it like on stage with the use of practicals and lightings and the use and it was made possible by the studio actually. The In a studio, we would be able to suddenly switch off the sun and the sky and just keep one small light bouncing on the table to light a face of two actresses who are talking together. And we did that several times. And as soon as Jacques understood that we had decided with the gaffer, Thomas Garot, to use only dimmable lights in the whole film. So we didn't use any HMI that you cannot just dim during the take. We'd used tungsten and LEDs, and everything was controlled by a console. So at one point, Jacques realized that he could just say, and on this line, can everything switch off? And it was something we did in the
Yeah,
film.
you
It's
can
really
control the
part of
environment.
the
Yeah.
language of the film. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. What were some of the CGI elements that you guys added and post that I don't know, maybe some people might be surprised to hear that that was not
Yeah, I think
practical.
there is 450 VFX shots in the film. So most of the time it will be just a blue screen in the background. But there are some full 3D shots. For example, in the final act, all of the when you see the cars riding from afar, it's full 3D. And when we were building this final act, which is more a big action sequence throughout a whole act, we were always, because we had to keep this sense of not too realistic, and we were shooting in France mostly, and for each shot it was okay, how do we do this shot and how do we do this shot? So the final gunfight is happening in the desert, and you have uh, some characters outside and some characters inside of an abandoned restaurant. So that mix of a quarry actually, where we shot the exteriors with a lighting that would just do the moon, and with VFX extensions, because around us were just walls, and some sequences that we shot in the studio for the interiors with some very minimal blue screens, and some 3D, full 3D shots, and some fully documentary shots that we did on a smaller team in Mexico. So it was like, okay, and for each shot, there would be just, okay, the answer for this shot is that.
Hmm. Yeah, well, it looks great. Well, Paul, it was great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time. And we'll see you back in a little bit.
Thank you.
Jomo Fray, cinematographer for Nickel Boys, one of the most, if not the most innovative films of the year with the first person POV. What was that first conversation like with Ramel Ross discussing this technique?
Yeah, it was it was a conversation where Ramel and I, even in our first conversations, we're trying to figure out what is point of view, what is first person. And pretty quickly on, we started using the term sentient perspective instead of saying POV, almost as a way to ground us in what I think Ramel was after was trying to think of an image that always felt connected to a human body, always felt like it was tied in a very present tense way to a real person navigating an often hostile environment. So it was one of those situations where even from the onset, it's like, okay, well, if we do want to do this sentient perspective, this first person perspective, how do we find more traditional film grammar? What does that mean in this visual style? What's an establishing shot? What's a cut? What's a transition? How do we move through space? How do we move through time? So, there was a way in which for us, even though from our very first conversation, Ramel said he wanted to do first person, it was really then trying to build and think about film at an almost subatomic level of, okay, well, what are the parts and pieces that make up what we understand as an establishing shot, and how can we still rebuild those concepts and take those traditional film concepts and make them work within this perspective that we were after.
Hmm. And I know you guys came up with a very meticulous shot list to accomplish that, but I think at the same time, when you're watching the film, you might also not even tell that you guys did that because everything feels so fluid and free flowing. Just it feels like, you are like the camera, you're the camera, you're watching like the leaves and the trees. And so what was it like coming up with that shot list and then actually executing it and make sure things feel natural?
Yeah, it was a really incredible process. And so in the shot list, we were almost thinking about the edit and thinking about every aspect of making the film holistically. And even at that point, Ramel had gathered all of the archival footage. So there was a way in which we were really trying to just build the movie together from scratch. And we're really, as you were saying, meticulous in how we kind of would lay out every single shot and every single scene we designed as a oneer, as a shot. Even though we knew we were going to cut, we still wanted the actors to be able to stay in flow and to kind of eliminate some aspects of artifice if we can get around them. But it was really about trying to have that kind of level of preparation so that on the day and on set, we could actually have a more improvisational feel and a more jazz-like feel. So it was really doing that preparation so that when we kind of got there, we could find the shot. And it was a situation with, because of the sentient perspective and the gaze, it's important to have a sense of wonderment. It's important to have a sense that the image itself is never in front of any action that's happening, which sounds simple, but it weirdly you have to kind of retrain yourself as an operator in moving the camera. Because we would always have this anecdote that in traditional cinema, the shot is a ground and then a glass comes in and it shatters. In our movie, the shot is looking somewhere, you hear a glass shatter, and then the camera has to swing to where the sound was, but you're always behind the action happening. And we would kind of remind ourselves of that each day to kind of orient ourselves to that. But yeah, no, I think it was fun finding those things and
Yeah.
fun kind of trying to inject some of the poetry into it. And our production designer, Nora Mendes, would start every day showing us, like, okay, these are 10 hero items in the room that you can interact with three of them, you can interact with five of them, you can interact with none of them, but they're just anchor points in the scene and in the set. So that over the course of a take, we would try to do different takes almost every single take to just stay in the world and the emotion of the take each time we were doing it, to kind of bring in some more of that kind of poetic, organic language.
Mhm. Yeah, you guys, I feel like you guys did that really well, just reacting to things that are happening or just how a human being would react to certain news. Because there's so many points, like there's a lot of bad news in this movie, but it's like when you get bad news, you might not be comfortable looking at that person delivering the news, so your drift gazes, and then like the camera has to shift that way too. So what was it like for you, like trying to mimic that human movement with the camera? Like your eyes would be here if you're looking right, you know?
Absolutely. It was really Wonderful. So basically, every scene would start with Ramel rehearsing with the actors, and I would usually be nearby, kind of watching them, and particularly watching Ethan and Brandon, the two actors that played Elwood and Turner, and just seeing how they move, seeing where their gaze went. And then in the scene, whether it was me or our camera operator, Sam Ellison, it was kind of about imbuing and mimicking the emotions we saw in their performance and trying to kind of imbue the camera with that kind of vulnerability, that kind of presence that the characters have, which makes it where something Ramel was always talking about is he didn't want the movie to merely capture how we see, but to capture how it feels to see, which I think gets at your question where it's not actually about seeing, it's about how does the human heart see the world? Where do you look when you hear bad news? Where do you look when you are looking at a crush for the first time? Where does your gaze go in the case of this movie that takes place in the Jim Crow South? If you're a black boy walking down the street, there's a white couple coming towards you, you get off of the sidewalk, but where do your eyes go? Does it go down to your shoes? Does it look at their shoes to kind of gauge the socioeconomics of their status? Do you look them in the eye? Do you not look them in the eye? Do you look ahead? Kind of for us, it was really about asking the questions of where does a person's gaze and where does a person's look reside when you're kind of, again, navigating a very hostile world around you.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, for you as your job normally, you're capturing the actors, but in this film, like you're part of the scene. Like you have to be like an actor too, and mimic them. And I'm thinking of like the scene when Turner hugs Ingenue. I mean, you do multiple times. Like, what was that like? Like you have to get into her and to hug her and to make that look realistic.
Yeah, even in the shot listing phase where Mel and I would have a DSLR and we would just practice certain things in the movie and be like, oh, does this feel right? No, 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 it should be a little higher up. And maybe that's something in there where, the audience has incredible amount of visual literacy being inside of their own body. So there's a way in which like genuinely some shots can be a centimeter off and it feels uncanny. And so we were always kind of working around that. But in terms of the question of working with actors in that way, it was really phenomenal. There's a way in which I think the image changes, and or at least to compose an image as a cinematographer changes when quite literally the image is hugging the actor and you're physically hugging them. You're making a connection. There's a physical intimacy there. There's a connection that's there that hopefully comes through in the image, but it kind of changes how you shoot. I always try to think of the ways in which sometimes you can tell an image that was shot by a lover or shot by a friend. It has a quality to it. There's both a quality from the subject that they're willing to be vulnerable and give something that they may not in a more traditional image. And there's also a way in which I think you can oftentimes see the love in how they're captured, where the camera is, how it's framing them. And I think that this movie was a situation to get inside of the emotional life of Turner and Elwood. You had to see the world as Turner and Elwood. You had to see the world as Turner and Elwood. And when you're seeing Hattie and you're seeing Ingenue, there's a deep love there that, more traditionally in cinematography, I'm often maybe imbuing the image with the emotion of the character, but this felt different because I had to have it in my body. And yeah, there was just something really powerful in that relationship. And I'm just so grateful for the actors also welcoming me into their space because, the way the camera moves, you are a scene partner. You have to be present to them. And there was an instance early on set on Ingenue's first day when she was sitting at a table and she was delivering bad news to Elwood. And there's this moment right before she's about to kind of say what she's saying and she's building up to it. And, I watched Ethan rehearse the scene and I was also thinking about it as Jomo and thinking, it's really hard making eye contact with someone when they're giving you news that's devastating them to have to deliver. And so as Jomo and as the gaze of Elwood, I kind of drifted away. And there was this moment in there where Ingenue paused and she just put her hand out across the table and she said, Elwood, look at me, son. And the camera is forced to drift back. It's forced to make and maintain
Was
her
was that like an
gaze.
improv by her? It wasn't in
That
this.
wasn't improv by her. That was totally off the
Mhm.
script.
So you
And
were
it
not
was
prepared for that.
was not prepared for that. And I think that there was this moment that, I'm honestly getting a bit of goosebumps thinking about it, where when the camera re-establishes and looks at her and she looks out of her lens and she says that, I remember when, Ramel said cut and I ran to the monitor to see him and we were both like vibrating. We're like, that's it. Like, that's actually why this perspective is so different and exciting, is that it actually is inside. It isn't just that it's inside the scene, it's that the image itself can change based on how the actors around it are moving. The image has to kind of be inside the scene. It has to truly be locked into being a scene partner. And there was something in that I think was exciting for us, because I don't think either of us had ever seen an image like that. And again, the gesture of turning back wasn't written
And
in
then
the
when you
script,
turn
but it
back, it's
felt
not going to
real.
be perfect either. It'd be like I have to, control myself and like, do I
Totally.
actually want to look in your eyes? Like,
Totally. Totally. There's a way in which it after that moment, I think we completely started shooting in a different way, because it was about the camera has to be vulnerable. The camera has to hold the uncertainty of life, the uncertainty of any given moment. And I think that really, yeah, I don't think I had ever experienced something like that as an image maker, and seeing that just kind of changed it. But again, on almost all the shots, the actor who is the perspective would often be very close to me, physically, kind of putting putting their legs in. I had their costume on in case I had to look down. You could see their body as my body. And, there were also scenes where we shot with systems like the Snorri cam, which is basically a metal chassis around the actor with poles going out the back to a camera block. And in those instances, there was a real kind of co-authorship and cross-pollination that was constantly happening, because, a cinematographer, me and our operator, Sam Allison, were kind of having to imbue ourselves with the emotion, almost be an actor inside the scene. And then in situations like the Snorri cam, when it's just attached to the actor's body, I remember talking to David Diggs, the actor who plays the older Elwood, and he and I looking at an image and kind of talking emotionally about it. He's like, okay, yeah, so like when he comes in, I'm trying to make a connection. So maybe I open up the right side of my chest, so kind of compositionally he comes into the shot. And when I feel that I'm thinking with more interiority, maybe I close down the right side of my shoulder, which kind of pulls him out of the composition. And I was like, yeah, like go with those
yeah,
instincts. And like, there's something that was really exciting to Ramel and I in terms of having some of those aspects of kind of cross-pollination and like
yeah.
co-authorship in it.
I mean, it looks amazing. Well, Jomo, it was great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time, and we'll see you back in a little bit.
Thank you.
Alice Brooks, cinematographer for Wicked. You worked with John Chu on In the Heights. So when did he first bring Wicked to you?
We first started talking about Wicked while he was cutting In the Heights. So he said to me, I think this is going to be our next project, and which was thrilling and exciting. And Wicked was my first non-indie movie. I mean, sorry, In the Heights was my first non-indie movie. And so it was pretty exciting.
Hmm. So what was John's vision for the film and the visual language? And obviously just having like the such a beloved, well-known IP to work with too. Like you want to get this right. So what were your discussions like about the film?
We started talking early on about themes and visual language and goals. John is a complete emotional storyteller. His goal is to tell a story through emotion, and he wants an environment that supports that. And so we first we discussed goals, and he asked me what my goals were, and I said that it would be the greatest love story ever told between these two women, these two best friends. And so we started that as sort of the place of making all our decisions. And then we made a huge list of different visual languages, because in Wicked, it's so many different stories and environments, and we go from the brightest of bright to the darkest of dark, and we are hugely epic and want to see the world of Oz, but at the heart of the movie, it's really about these two women. And so the close-ups to us were everything.
Hmm. I the color palettes. I mean, knowing you have to incorporate colors like green and pink. How did that affect how you were going to shoot it, and the lighting and the softness or the edginess, I guess you would use to light everything.
Yeah, I mean, we wanted a romantic, classic Hollywood look. We wanted to make an old fashioned movie like Casablanca or I mean, in terms of the love story, or something like Gone with the Wind, or The English Patient, in terms of like these great love stories. But so there is a romantic quality to it and a softness to the whole film. Um, but sorry, I forgot your question as I started.
Just like knowing you have to
Oh,
work
the
with like
color.
green and pink. Yeah.
Right. So then, so in L. Frank Baum's original books, there is a color description in almost every paragraph. Color is the language of Oz. And so, yes, we have green and pink, but there's a whole world of colors. It's the whole rainbow. And, but we started testing very early on. I think we had 18 weeks of prep. And during that period of time, we would do lighting tests, camera tests once a week. And we would, early on, I said to the gaffer, I really would like to use every color of the rainbow to light throughout the movie. And so we'd start to test, like, what is pink in our movie, and what is blue in our movie, and what is green, and what is yellow. And so, for instance, the Ozdas Ballroom, that was one of the earliest color tests we did. And the set is built out of clear resin, so I could have made it any color I wanted to. And so we had endless possibilities. So, but I started looking at the costumes for Shiz, and at one point there was a piece of blue, like this tealy blue fabric put over our stand-in, who was in green makeup. And I looked at it and I thought, oh, the green and the blue look quite beautiful together. And then we put it on Cynthia, and suddenly I was like, oh, the Ozdust is the heart of the movie. This is where they fall in love with each other. This is where they connect and finally can see each other. And so I wanted Cynthia to look the most beautiful that she had ever looked. And I felt like the blue surrounding her would do that. And so we had a 4x4 piece of resin wall, and that we were testing different colors on. And then to find that blue took quite a long time. And we actually pre-lit that set, I think, over the course of 4 weekends, just slowly dialing in the right blue. I mean, just little teeny increments. It was pretty fun.
That's incredible. I also love the way you guys use light in the film, and the way that and like the use of the sun, I guess specifically, like in the way it rises for Glinda, like the whole popular sequence, like that's it's morning, and then when we finally get to the Emerald City and meet Oz and everything, and the sun is setting for Elphaba, and we get to define gravity, and it's about to get dark. So what was it like lighting those sequences for each of them like that?
So I had this idea during prep that this, well, first, let me backtrack. John and I had this discussion about themes, and it was that the dark is not dark and light is not light, good is not good, and evil is not evil in our movie. So what we perceive as good is simply not good, and evil is not evil. So in that idea, I started to think about time of day when things happen. And I had this idea where the sun would always rise for Glinda and set for Elphaba. And there's 2 parts to this movie, and I play with this throughout part 2 as well. But in part 1, we meet Glinda in Munchkin Land as the sun is rising behind her in her bubble. It's morning. And then she meets Fiyero in the morning, and Elphaba meets Fiyero in the night. And Elphaba has this long scene before I'm Not That Girl, where the sun is setting for her, through I'm Not That Girl. And in Popular, the sun rises for Glinda. And the sunrise for Glinda was the first one we did. That was our second week of shooting the film out of, we shot 155 days. So it was day 5, 6. And so we had tested all different pinks for her sunrise. And the scene starts in after the Ozdas, very late at night, very intimate, with these 2 girls just talking and having fun together. And then we end up going into Popular, and the sun is rising throughout the entire sequence. And then for Alphaba, we also had to change that time of day in the script. I asked John if it would be okay to suggest times of day. And so we ended up shooting Wizamania during that was a huge backlot set. It was the size of 4 American football fields outside. So we had to be able to control the light because of this idea of the sun setting. So we shot night for evenings all night long, and we put dinos all around that became our sun source, zigzagging off of buildings. And then they go through the Emerald Palace, they meet the wizard, and then they rise in this big balloon chase where the sun's just very low in the sky. And then they get to this very dark cavernous space where everything is really awful. It is Alphaba's lowest point, where they're saying she is the Wicked Witch. It's the first announcement of her being the Wicked Witch. And she starts to rise up these stairs. And when she rises up the stairs, there is Oz, and the sun is just dropping. And I found this picture of what I wanted the sunset to look like. And I printed it out big on my wall. I showed it to everyone. I'm like, this is what the end of our movie looks like. And it is exactly what I dreamed of. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, it's so thrilling. It's like when it just gradually gets dark, and it's like evolving her, and she processes everything with like who the wizard is. So it's really well
It's
done.
a 40-minute sunset,
Yeah.
and the
A
lighting.
very long sunset.
Yeah, I mean, we took nature as our. I wanted to make a theatrical movie, still paying tribute to the stage show, and so the sun became our spotlight, and that was part of the idea too, and that was nature is a massive theme in our movie, and so when I realized the sun could be our spotlight and moving the sun could be all our lighting cues, and I think in the movie we've got something like 7,000 lighting cues.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned before that the set was the size of 4 American football fields, and you really see that in the film. I feel like you get the scope and the scale of all the sets that you guys had. I think you guys had 17 sets, right?
We had 17 interior sets.
Okay.
And we had 4 additional backlot sets, and then we shot location work too. So it was
So
pretty.
what was it like getting all of that like in camera, like in frame?
I mean, it was amazing because people don't build these kind of sets anymore. They rely on blue screen and volumes, but I had stages where the set went from fire lane to fire lane and from the floor to the Reds. And so when you look at the throne room and you see all these layers of ceiling, we had to rig lights in there before the ceiling was put in, because there was no room to work above, because it went all the way to the ceiling. And I think it's like 18 rows or something of ceiling. And it was, I looked at our library set, which is massive. I think it was 185 feet long by 145 feet. And I had 495 lights on that set. So I feel very grateful that I got to shoot on real sets and light real sets, and everything was tangible, and I could be inspired by the set design, and John and I could move the camera 360 degrees. And that is another visual theme. We move the camera 360 degrees throughout the movie.
Which one was your favorite set to work on?
Oh my gosh, there are so many amazing sets. I really love the lower attic into the upper attic. That I think that was 2 different sets, because there's this huge big staircase that takes us all the way up for defying gravity. So I think those 2 sets I love, because I could play really, really dark in the bottom and then come out into this brightness, and then the whole scene just starts to get dark. It's a 40-minute sunset from Wizamania to the end of the movie.
Well, Alex, it was great speaking with you. Can't wait for part 2 next year. And you get to stay on because everyone's coming back.
Okay, great.
Welcome to our Meet the Experts cinematography panel. Today we are joined by Paul Guilhaume from Emilia Pérez, Jomo Fray from Nickel Boys, and Alice Brooks from Wicked. Thank you all for being here. I'm curious to know, like, when you first read a script, like how quickly do you picture in your mind how you want to compose a scene or shoot a scene or approach a scene, or does it just vary from script to script? Paul, let's start with you.
When I read the script, I think there are two questions. The question that I have as a cinematographer is, can I see images emerging, or do I feel that I cannot see maybe the images? And I heard Jomo before answer a question pretty close to that, and you were telling that you you kind of search the moment where you're like, I don't have the image yet, and until now I've more been kind of believing in that moment where I'm like, okay, I can see something. This film is for me, and but maybe the next step is what you described, Joe.
I don't think next step, just a different step. But yeah,
So Gemma, how about you?
yeah, I think that this is maybe a hot take for a cinematographer, but I really, when I first read a script, the movies that really compel me to really want to take the meeting and want to think about it are the ones that I finish and I haven't been able to see an image. I don't know what the hell this movie looks like. I think that for me, there's something in that that excites me because it kind of means that we're gonna have to find it together. Like the director and I are gonna really have to dig for something. And I think that I love when images surprise me. I love when images surprise me in other people's work. I love when images surprise me on set. I love when images surprise me of even something that I was one of the architects of. And on the day when you kind of see all the things come together, there's something that is part of the magic to be of the experience. So yeah, I think that I often go for things where I don't really know what they'll
You
look
like the
like.
challenge. You want the challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want the challenge, but even if it's not like kind of a conceptually large movie, but something where it's like, oh, clearly there's so much personality and history of the director put into the script that it's exciting to me to like, okay, great. It's going to take, weeks of us going out for dinner and just talking and getting to know each other to kind of figure out what is this image because I'm getting to know this person and really try to make a specific and bespoke thing for this director and for this script and for the project. I think that yeah, the kind of finding it together, whether it's high concept or not high concept, yeah, I think that's really fun for me.
Mhm.
I think for
Yeah.
me, it's if I go to bed after reading a script and I really don't want to shoot it because it stirred something up so much in me that
Mm.
it that and I go to bed going, I'm absolutely not doing this movie. And then I wake up the next morning and I can't get it out of my head. And then and for instance, like when I did Tick Tick Boom, I read it and I put it away. I said, there's no way I'm doing this. And then the next morning I woke up and I'm like, I like opened my iPad and it was still there. I'm like, I loved the story so much, but it was emotionally, I was like, can I sit with that emotion for such a long time? And um, Wicked, I didn't have a script. I knew this show, but I didn't have a script. Um, and that was different because it was just like, okay, I'm getting on this train with John Chu because I've known him for 25 years and it's going to be thrilling and exciting. And I know we're going to make a great movie together. Um, but again, it was the emotion because I love making movies with John because of that emotional storytelling. And I know if everything my mentor once said to me, in cinematography there's no perfect frame and there's no perfect lighting. This was when I was in film school, and I that rings in my head all the time. And he's like, in a still photograph you can have that perfect frame, but not in cinematography because everything's constantly moving, and the light, the actors, the camera, and so I know if people walk out of a movie and they felt something, that I've done my job. But if someone came out of a movie that I shot and said, "Oh, that was technically perfect," then I wouldn't have done my job because I want them to be in that emotion of what the characters are feeling. And so I think if there's a script where I know that exists, that's what I want to do. But it's usually in a script that I want to walk away from because it stirs something inside me.
Yeah. Well, in that similar vein, I guess, like, what is it like for you as cinematographers when you do see the first cut or the final cut of a film? Like you were, you shot all these images and now you see it all as a whole. Like, has there been any cases that surprised you in a good or a bad way when you see the final product? Jomo, how about you?
Mm, yeah,
You don't have to name the
I
bad
hate
ones.
no, I hate it. I think it's something that I've gotten better at forgiving myself for disliking the process of seeing a first cut or even a late cut. I think that there's something about I'm obsessive about my work. I'm obsessive about the image, and I think that feature filmmaking is a really fascinating thing where again I think it's at some level, you go in saying that you totally know you're in control of every aspect of the image of what's going to happen, but in my experience it's often that you're finding the movie together with the actors, with the director, everyone is finding the movie together. And I oftentimes feel like at the end of the movie it's like, okay, now I'm ready to make this movie. So there's a way in which I oftentimes, when I'm seeing a cut later, I'm seeing it as the person who has learned a lot of things about filmmaking, about the movie itself. And the things that I've learned have now been internalized. So then when I see what I perceive to be mistakes of mine or things I wish I had done differently, it's difficult for me. It's difficult for me. But yeah, I think like Alice is saying, when I know it works at some level, when I can like, even with my kind of obsessive aspects about it, when I can feel something, when I've watched a cut and it's like one of those things where you are one of the architects, you know how this is designed, like kind of the magic trick you can see behind it, and yet I'm still getting teary or I'm really like plumbing the depths of myself. There's, I think it doesn't happen often, but when it does, it really, I think that that's the high I'm constantly chasing in cinematography, is that feeling when you are just moved emotionally. And it kind of doesn't matter that you were on set and you saw how it was made. It's just evocative. Um, so I think that every project is with the hope that that'll happen. But yeah, I'm a harsh critic and I'm not a fan of watching
You're
edits.
not like actors who don't want to watch their own work.
I definitely get it.
Alice, how about you?
I mean, every single time I watch a rough cut or a third cut or a fifth cut or a 20th cut, all I can do is go, oh, I next time I'm going to do, in order to make it better. Like right, as artists, we always want to do a better job and make and grow. And I think each scene you shoot is an opportunity to continue to grow and to pull you in different directions and to challenge you and to make you a stronger storyteller. And so I think if I just sat and watched a movie and felt, okay, I did a great job, then I wouldn't be changing and growing and evolving over time. And I love working with John because we've grown together. We have literally grown up together. We were 22 years old when we met, and we're now 45. And we now are watching our children grow up, and our spouses are friends, and it's really remarkable to constantly challenge each other. And then I go off and make other movies with other people. I'm doing one right now, and I'm growing in a very different way, but then I can bring that back to our relationship. And I think and it's interesting though, I say this because when I saw Wicked for the first time, it's the first time I watched a rough cut and I didn't even think about my work. I just sat back and I watched the
As a fan, like,
no, I sat there and I was completely immersed in these two women,
Mm.
and I didn't sit there and criticize my work. On the second and third and fourth viewing, I did. But on that first one, it was the first time I've ever just watched the movie and gone and just like I cried, I felt something, and the movie has evolved so much from that very first cut. But it was really it was a different experience than I've had, and I highly doubt that will happen again because I'm very critical as well.
Well, Paul, how about you? Are you your own harshest critic?
No, yeah, usually I've always warned directors not to invite me too early in the process of the editing because I think I get panic attacks when I see it. Like, but there's something that's very real for me is that before the sound mixing, the movie is not really like a movie. It looks like even with the best directors, there's something that just doesn't flow, and it looks like it's not finished or it's very strange. And you can watch a film without any grading, but with a good sound, then you'll get just into the story. So it's always very complicated to me to see those early steps, and maybe a little bit like Alice on that film on Emilia Pérez when I went to a screening. There was a lot of guests, and it was still very early because it was before the VFX actually worked, because it was just to kind of validate the editing. And we were into this cinema, and with there were 400 shots with blue screens somewhere in the back and yeah, for the first time it's not I I didn't really see the movie, but I was kind of okay. Wow, we did that also. It was like growing, and so this film was so big for all of us to make with so many different times and sequences that it was like okay, we did that. Like, yeah, and then yeah, I only see the film for the first time during a premiere, I think, after all of the work, and then suddenly you have the people around you, and you can feel if the film is working or not when you are surrounded with real people with the emotion of the first screening.
Yeah, sure.
That's fun. No,
Yeah, and
I actually haven't seen Wicked with an audience, and I'm going to see it on Saturday night for the first time with people. So that's I hadn't thought about that. That is that it's very true. Like you want to feel what other people are around you feeling. I mean, that's why we make movies, right? Is so that it's that collective experience of watching a film in a theater.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's the only moment where suddenly it's not work anymore. Yeah, there's nothing to do. It's just you just can't be
Can't change anything anymore.
you can't change it, and you can
the
stop
best thing you can
criticizing
do.
yourselves.
Yeah. But truly, I feel like there's something that feels like magic in those screenings where you can hear the room hold its breath, where you can hear them all collectively laugh or hear people tear up. Like genuinely, it feels like magic. Like it is, these people came into this room ostensibly with a neutral emotional profile. And because of sound and images and light, they're literally emotions evoking out of their body that they can't stop. Is like, so
I have to
great. I
imagine
mean, I'm not telling you guys, but
yeah, but I have to imagine it's even more special when it's like for us a moment where you least expect someone to react that way. You didn't expect them to cry at the scene when you were shooting it. It was just like another, run-of-the-mill scene for you, but like, oh my God, they're actually crying at this moment.
totally. Yeah, no, it's really special. But as Paul said, it's when it becomes theirs, like it becomes the audience's. And at some level, all you can do is kind of sit there and see how it is experienced is yes, yeah, really grateful for those moments. Yeah.
Well, finally, do you guys remember the first time you were really wowed by an image on film? I'm assuming it might be like when you were a kid, maybe like, but do you remember that moment or what you were watching? Oh,
I remember it's the first movie I remember watching, and I was 5, and I was curled up in my dad's arms, and we were watching The Natural by Caleb Deschanel. And there was something about it that I knew was magic, and I didn't know what it was at the time. And it was light. I mean, I think the lighting in that movie, I've got goosebumps just thinking about the film. And and I can still see every image in my head. And actually in Wicked, we do this big explosion at the end when Elphaba says no wizard that there ever was is ever going to bring me down. And all of Emerald City gets brighter and brighter and brighter, and then all the bulbs explode. And And I kept saying, oh, it's the natural to the special effects team. I'm like, I want the bulbs to explode like the natural. And we shot in London, and the natural's an American baseball movie.
They're like,
And
what's that?
they had no clue what it was. And so then I YouTubed it and showed it to them, and they're like, oh, this is great. And so that's my
I love that. The natural is inspo for the kid. Yes. Who's next? Who has something? Jomo, Paul? Don't remember.
Man, yeah, it's honestly, I think that's like Alice, there's so many images throughout my life that have probably like been really like clicked in, like, you know, off the top of my head, like, you know, moments in Empire Strikes Back, in the carbonite chamber, carbonite freezing room, like the blues and the oranges of that. Maybe the first time I saw The Conformist, some of the work that Storaro did on that. And, you know, I think one of the moments where it kind of hit me, because, you know, really early on, I had said I wanted to be a filmmaker to my family, but I think the first time like images specifically kind of hit me was when I watched In the Mood for Love, shot by Christopher Doyle and directed by Wong Kar-wai. I think it was one of the, you know, iconic shots from that movie of Maggie Cheung kind of going down to get noodles. And there was something that I stopped reading the subtitles completely for the rest of the movie. I just kind of was locked in and entranced by the movie. And there was a weird way in which I didn't know what people were saying. I didn't know kind of what the drama was, but I felt it. I recognized those feelings and the images and the music alone of, you know, quizás, 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 like it just
It transcends
completely,
literal
yeah.
language. Yeah.
It truly, yes. I think that was, I think you said it so well. I think that was the moment when it felt to me like, oh, an image truly can, you know, I think that there's a way in which, you know, racism, sexism, homophobia, there are a lot of things that get in the way of humans communicating with other humans. And images aren't perfect. They also have their own history. But I think it was in moments like that where it showed me like, whoa, an image can really take you to a place that's so hard for language to take you to, a place of truly seeing another person, really feeling a shared emotion. And I think it was Christopher Doyle's work on that movie that kind of put it on the table, that I didn't know that movies could do that. I know that they could transport me, but I'm not sure I knew that they could burrow so deep into my heart so quickly. That was new.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Paul, how about you?
Well, I don't. I think as a teen, as a young person discovering cinema, I was just first struck by films that were very different, and I think I didn't have the tools at one point to know why I was just struck by those films. And I think now I can say that Faces, maybe by John Cassavetes, was my first huge emotion of image, but at the time I was thinking it was just the film itself. Or maybe The Seven Samurais from Kurosawa, and now I know that okay, this black and white is silvery. It has always very strong highlights, but it's not burning the image. So a lot of technical reading that I can do now, but at the time I was thinking that it was just a film that was magic, and I had no way to explain how.
Yeah, now you know the nuances of it. Yeah. Well, we have to wrap, unfortunately, but it was great speaking with all of you guys. Thank you so much for your time, and congratulations again on all of your projects.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a
Bye.
good one.